Maybe you had a rough week at work and realized, I don't want to be forced to do this for the next 30 years. But you look at your bank account, you look at what's left after rent and bills, and you do the math. And the math is brutal. At this savings rate, you are not free in 10 years. You are not free in 20. You are basically free right around the time your body starts falling apart. So what do you actually do? You've probably already found the FIRE movement. Vicki Robbins' Your Money or Your Life, Mr. Money Mustache, the whole index fund and compound interest playbook. Max out the 401k, invest the rest, let it compound, hit your rule of 25. It's a real system. But it was built for people with money left over after expenses. In 2026, most people are already living like they are broke before they even open the budgeting app. There's nothing left to cut. So the only move that actually changes the math is making more. And there are specific ways to do that, which don't require starting a business from scratch, going viral, or getting lucky on a stock. This video is 5 of those moves, grounded in why they work, not just what to do. By the end, you will know exactly which one fits where you are right now. Let's run the actual numbers. Not a hypothetical, your numbers. Take a $60,000 salary. Invest 20% of that every year, which is already more than most people manage, and assume a 7% annual return, which is the long run. Inflation-adjusted average, the S&P 500 has historically delivered. At that rate, according to the standard FIRE calculator used by most personal finance communities, you hit financial independence in about 34 years. 34 years. You are basically free at 60. Now let's say you are extremely disciplined. You cut everything. You get the savings rate up to 25%, which at $60,000 a year means you are living on $3,750 a month before taxes. You are eating rice, you canceled Netflix, you have not been on a trip in 2 years. You run the calculator again. You shave off 3 years. You are free at 57. That's the ceiling of what discipline alone can do when the input is fixed. J.L. Collins spells this out in The Simple Path to Wealth. The math is real, it works, but it only gets interesting when the income variable is large enough that the contributions actually move the portfolio. On $60,000 a year, they barely do. What changes if the amount going into the portfolio doubles? $12,000 a month instead of $12,000 a year. That's not a fantasy. That's what the next 5 moves are actually about. Move 1. Skill arbitrage. This isn't about charging more for what you do. It's about understanding how value works that most people never figure out. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here's the thing. Most people price themselves based on what the market pays for their skill category. A developer looks at what developers make. A designer looks at what designers make. And they compete in that market, which means they compete on price, which means they always lose to someone willing to charge less. That's the NPC move. It hands every pricing decision to the buyer and assumes all buyers are the same. They're not. Take Marcus. 28 years old, front-end developer, working at a mid-size agency in Austin, billing at $65 an hour. Investing about $800 a month, doing the math every few months and not liking what he saw. Then something shifted. One of his clients had an e-commerce store, Shopify, about $40,000 in daily revenue. The checkout broke on a Friday night before a product launch. The client called Marcus in a panic. He fixed it in 2 hours. The client paid him $3,000 without negotiating for 2 hours of work. That's $1,500 an hour. Marcus had been charging $65. Same skill, same code, completely different buyer. The difference wasn't the work, it was the stakes on the other side of the table. Robert Cialdini's scarcity principle and influence is simple. When something critical is unavailable, people stop comparing prices. The mindset shift is this. Stop looking for people who want your skill. Start looking for people who are bleeding without it. That's a completely different search. Marcus spent the next 6 months building a list of e-commerce brands doing over $1 million a year in revenue, with small technical teams. He'd reach out after spotting a broken feature on their site. 6 months of mostly silence, a few wrong fits, one client who wasted his time. Then a run of 3 clients in 1 month. His first $10,000 month was month 7. His portfolio contributions went from $800 a month to $4,000. The calculator started saying something different. This one is about understanding that somewhere out there, right now, there is a person who would pay you $10,000 for something you could build in a week. The only reason that transaction hasn't happened is that neither of you knows the other exists yet. Here's the principle. Value doesn't come from effort. It comes from information asymmetry, the gap between what you know and what the other person needs. When that gap is big enough and the problem is expensive enough, the price of closing it is almost arbitrary. Concrete example. Spend 3 weeks going deep on how the best direct-to-consumer brands actually run paid advertising. Primary sources, earnings calls, founder interviews, published agency frameworks. Map the entire workflow from first test to scale. Then take that document to a $50 million logistics company that just hired its first marketing director. They don't want a 6-month consulting engagement. They want the map. And they will pay $10,000 for it, because building it themselves would take a year they don't have. Now here's where most people stop. They think, I'm not qualified. Someone will see through me. That's the wrong frame. That logistics company isn't hiring McKinsey. They're hiring the first person who shows up with a clear answer. The bar isn't being the best in the world. The bar is knowing more than they do right now. Crazy. But that's how it works. Move 3, income stacking. Move 3 is not complicated, but almost nobody does it right. Once you have a second income stream, even a small one, the move is to ring-fence it before it touches your life. Use a separate account with an automatic transfer that goes straight into the portfolio. It never hits your checking account. This matters more than the amount. $1,000 a month, compounding separately from your salary, untouched for 10 years at 7%, becomes over $170,000. Not because $1,000 a month is a lot, because it never got spent on anything. Morgan Housel makes this point in The Psychology of Money. Financial success has less to do with intelligence and more to do with behavior. Money without a pre-assigned destination gets spent. The solution is not more discipline. It is making the right move the default move. Build the pipe before the money flows. Then do not touch it. Move 4. Asymmetric bets. Most personal finance advice is optimized entirely around not losing. Low-cost index funds, diversification, stay the course. That's not wrong. That's the foundation. But if the foundation is the whole strategy, you're taking 30 years to get somewhere. Here's the counterintuitive part. You can be wrong most of the time and still win if the one time you're right pays back 20 times what you put in. Nassim Taleb called this the barbell strategy in Anti-Fragile. Safe on one end, aggressive on the other. The middle is the trap. 90% of the portfolio protected, 10% in positions with capped downside and theoretically uncapped upside. The move is simple. Take 10% of the portfolio, a fixed amount you've decided you can afford to lose entirely, and put it in positions that can multiply. Early-stage companies through platforms like AngelList or Republic. Deep out-of-the-money options if you understand how they work. Emerging market plays before the mainstream narrative forms. You'll be wrong most of the time. That's fine. The math still works. The caveat is this. It only functions if the other 90% is genuinely protected. If you're using money you can't afford to lose, you're not making asymmetric bets. You're gambling. Move 5. Leverage. This is the one that actually explains how every serious wealth story you've ever heard was built. And it has nothing to do with saving up enough money to invest. It never did. Every real estate empire, every private equity firm, every startup that scaled fast, built on borrowed capital. Not their own money, other people's money, structured so the returns flow back to them. It just never makes it into the personal finance content aimed at people making $60,000 a year. Here's how it works in practice. You find a property worth $200,000. You put in $20,000 of your own money. You cover the rest through a bank loan, a seller financing arrangement, or a partner who contributes capital in exchange for a share of the returns. That's a 10 times multiplier on your capital. No savings rate produces that. The risk is real. Leveraged positions can go against you, And when they do, the losses are also multiplied. This is not a move for money you can't afford to lose, and it's not a move to make before you understand what you're buying. Here's what all 5 moves have in common. They're not about working harder. They're not about being more disciplined. They're about understanding that the game most people are playing, the one that says optimize what you have, save what's left, and wait, has a ceiling built into it. And the people who get out early figured out how to play a different game entirely. The NPC move is to work with what you have. The escaped player figures out how to work with what they can control. Those are 2 different worlds, and almost nobody tells you the second one exists. Start with whichever of these 5 moves you're closest to right now. That's the only question worth answering today.